My father built a business from nothing. My stepmother gave it away in less than a week after his funeral. Not to me, his only son, but to some nephew she met twice in her life. That's how fast loyalty dies when money's involved. I never wanted a war. I just wanted to run the company my father spent 30 years building from the ground up. He used to say, "I'm not leaving you millions, son. I'm leaving you something better, a legacy you can grow." That legacy was a mid-sized logistics firm, with good people, steady contracts, and a name built on sweat, not shortcuts. I was 30, and I had worked there since I was 22. Every role, from operations assistant to project lead. I thought I'd earned it, but apparently blood doesn't mean much when you're not your stepmother's blood. 3 days after the funeral, she called an emergency board meeting, said it was about streamlining succession. I showed up in a black suit, still grieving. She showed up in pearls and red lipstick, flanked by some guy I'd never seen before. "Everyone, this is Keith. He'll be assuming the role of interim CEO until we sort out legal formalities," she announced. Like it was nothing. No vote, no warning. I froze. "I'm sorry." "What?" I asked, looking around the room. No one met my eyes. Not the CFO I had coffee with every Monday. Not the HR lead who I helped through her divorce. They just sat there, silent. Keith smiled like a cat who just got the last mouse. "Hey, bro. Heard a lot about you. Hope we can work together." I wanted to believe it was a joke. But when security showed up 10 minutes later to escort me out for a cooling-off period, reality hit like a punch in the gut. That walk through the glass hallway, with everyone pretending not to look, was the longest 5 minutes of my life. Some betrayals don't bleed. They burn silently, and you don't feel it until you've already been reduced to ashes. She filed a motion 2 days later, claiming my father never signed the final succession documents. The board, most of whom she'd charmed or bought, backed her. I had no legal grounds, no proof, no voice. The final blow came in a letter, delivered to the cheap motel I was staying in after being evicted from my apartment. Company property, of course. Effective immediately, you are removed from all leadership duties and your employment is terminated under Clause 9B. 9 years, gone in a printed paragraph. And you know what hurt most? Not the job, not even the company. It was that my stepmother didn't hesitate. She didn't flinch. She didn't even pretend to grieve. She just moved on, moved up, moved me out. Wasn't angry at first, just numb. Like a window shattered in winter and you're too cold to move. But something inside me refused to stay broken. I may have lost my father's company, but I hadn't lost his lessons. The moment they shut that door in your face is the moment you start building your own. And that's exactly what I did. Thank you for staying with me through this. First part. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted like family, I know how that silence feels. Your support gives voice to stories like mine. Stories most people are too proud or too broken to ever tell. By the way, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments. I'm thinking the next story might just be set in your hometown. They didn't just steal the company. They erased me from the story I helped build. You'd think losing the company was the end. It wasn't. It was just the beginning of how far they were willing to go to humiliate me. Within a week of my removal, all traces of me were scrubbed. My name, my photo, my biography on the company website, gone. The About Us section now listed Keith as one of the founding family successors, like he had been born in the boardroom. I had people calling me, old vendors, ex-staff, even friends asking what happened, but no one really wanted the truth. They wanted a version that made sense, and my stepmother gave them one. He stepped down. Couldn't handle the pressure after his father passed. It's tragic, really. Tragic, she called it tragic. They didn't just push me out, they made me invisible, like I had never been there at all. A month later, she hosted a restructuring gala for clients and stakeholders. I wasn't invited, of course, but someone sent me the photos. Keith standing at the podium, champagne in hand, giving a speech, smiling like the face of a new era. My father's company logo behind him. My legacy hijacked. But what broke me wasn't the image. It was the headline in a local business paper the next day. Fresh leadership, fresh future. How Keith J. is taking Logan Freight into the 21st century. Logan. my last name, used like a brand he casually inherited. I stared at that headline for hours in a motel room I was renting by the week, staring until my eyes hurt, not from tears, from rage. That's when I realized they weren't just stealing. Their company. They were rewriting a legacy. They were replacing me. There's a kind of grief that comes when you're not just robbed, you're erased. And the worst part? People believed them. Because power speaks louder than pain. And when you have no title, no wealth, and no voice, you're just background noise. I tried to fight back, called lawyers. Reached out to former board members, but the doors that once welcomed me were now sealed shut, tight-lipped, distant, like I had caught something contagious. Eventually, I stopped trying. I stopped talking. Even rage has an expiration date when no one's listening. So I picked up the only thing still intact, the car my dad gave me, and I drove. Nowhere in particular. Just away. Away from the skyline I once called home. Away from the name they twisted. Away from the people who watched me fall and said nothing. Drove until the city disappeared in the rearview mirror, until silence became company, until shame became fuel, because somewhere along that stretch of highway, I realized something. If they can replace you that easily, maybe it's time to become someone they'll never be able to ignore again. They didn't just leave me behind, they left me for dead. The city I once knew didn't recognize me anymore, or maybe it chose not to. Every sidewalk I walked felt unfamiliar. Every building I passed felt like a monument to what I'd lost. I became a ghost in my own story, wandering in the ruins of someone else's victory parade. I lived in my car for nearly 3 months, not because I was lazy, not because I was hopeless, because I was invisible. I parked behind a rundown gym off the interstate, 24-hour access to a bathroom, a sink, and a few hours of forced light. I kept a plastic bin in the trunk with clothes, a blanket, and 2 old books my dad once gave me on business strategy. Funny. At one point, I read them to lead teams. Now, I read them to remember who I was. I worked the graveyard shift at a warehouse, lifting, stacking, sweating through the night in silence. No one there knew my name, no one cared. The manager was a 25-year-old kid who treated me like I was useless. Once, he said, "People like you don't bounce back. You peak once. Then, it's over." He said it with a smirk. He was wrong, but at that time, part of me believed him. Rock bottom doesn't come with warning signs. It just swallows you quietly while the world keeps going. There were days I didn't speak a word to anyone, there. Were nights I stared at the ceiling of my car, wondering how I went from executive meetings to wiping down forklift controls at 2 a.m. And the silence was loud. No calls. No texts. The friends I once helped with job referrals, business leads, even rent money, all gone. It's strange how fast people forget you when there's nothing left to take. Still, something inside me refused to die. Not pride. That was already gone, not revenge, not yet. Something quieter, older. Call it memory, call it instinct. Even when no one believes in you, the part of you that remembers who you were, that's the part they can't erase. One night, after another 12-hour shift, I sat in the corner of the break room, hands bruised and trembling. I pulled out a napkin and started sketching. Not because I had a plan, but because I had nowhere else to place my mind. I drew the outline of a logistics model, then a warehouse layout, then an operational flowchart. It was muscle memory, but it felt like something more, like the beginning of something I hadn't let myself believe in for a long time, a way out, because maybe, just maybe, they hadn't taken everything. Maybe they'd only taken what was easy to steal, and what was left was the part they didn't see coming. Revenge doesn't begin with rage, it begins when someone finally looks at you and sees more than your failure. The warehouse cafeteria was as bland as the rest of the building. White walls, plastic chairs, a vending machine with flickering lights. But that day something was different. I had just finished moving 12 pallets by hand. My shirt clung to my back and my legs were shot. I grabbed a lukewarm sandwich and sat in my usual corner, hoping for 20 minutes of silence before heading back into the chaos. That's when he sat down across from me. Older guy, khakis, button-up, silver wedding ring. Not warehouse staff. He looked too clean. You're the guy who sketches flowcharts on napkins, right? He asked, smiling like he already knew the answer. I looked up. Depends who's asking. Name's Marcus. I run operations for a supply chain startup. I've seen you around. You're not like the others here. I didn't know what to say. Compliments felt foreign, suspicious. He leaned in. You ever consider doing something bigger with that mind of yours? I almost laughed. Like what? I've got a resume stained in disgrace and a reputation nobody touches. That's just paper, he said calmly. What matters is whether you still know how to think. Sometimes the only person who can restart you is a stranger who doesn't know who broke you. He slid a business card across the table. Come by tomorrow night, just to talk. I'll buy the coffee. I stared at it for a long time. The logo was nothing fancy, but the name, ArcCore Logistics, small firm, new, hungry. And just like that, I felt something in my chest I hadn't felt in months. Possibility. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my car, staring at the ceiling, rehearsing what I'd say, how much to reveal, how much to hide. But when I met Marcus the next evening, he didn't ask for my story. He asked for ideas. He pulled out a whiteboard in a tiny, half-furnished office and said, "Show me how you'd fix our routing problem." So I did. One diagram led to another. One flaw became a solution. Within an hour, he wasn't taking notes, he was grinning. "You're wasted in that warehouse." I shrugged. "Tell that to the people who erased me." He looked me dead in the eye. "Then let's make something they can't ignore." That was the moment I realized. I didn't have to take anything back from them. I could build something better, something louder, something undeniable. For the first time since it all collapsed, I walked home with a purpose. No, not home. The car. But it didn't feel like a cage that night. It felt like a cocoon. And I wasn't who I was when I stepped into that cafeteria. I was evolving. Slowly, quietly, dangerously. They thought I was gone for good. But ghosts don't vanish, and they haunt you from the shadows. The first time I saw my name on a contract again, it wasn't on the front page. It was in the footer, small font, consultant credit. But it was mine. And more than that, it was the beginning. Marcus brought me on as a freelance strategist. Said the company couldn't afford full-time yet. I didn't care. After months of being no one, being needed again felt like oxygen. The office was small. 3 desks, 1 busted air conditioner, and a coffee machine that made more noise than coffee. But I didn't need luxury, I needed direction. And I had one. Every day, I walked in wearing the same clothes I wore at the warehouse. And every night I stayed long after the lights went out, building route simulations, supplier matrices, margin forecasts, tools of the trade I had once used to run my father's empire. Now I was building a new one silently from the bones up. The most dangerous thing you can do to a man you bury alive is let him breathe again. Our first client came from a cold call, a regional distributor that was hemorrhaging money on late shipments and poor inventory control. I spent 5 days dissecting their supply chain, 4 more rebuilding it on paper. And on the 10th day, if they called back with 3 words, it actually worked. That moment, better than applause, better than revenge, it was proof. Word spread slowly. A referral here, a whisper there. But that was all I needed. Within 3 months, ArcCore had 4 paying clients. Within 6, we had an intern. Within 8, we moved out of the tiny office and into a shared space with real desks, glass doors, and enough light to see the future. I still kept my name out of headlines, still refused to appear on company bios. Not because I was ashamed, but because I wasn't ready to be seen. Not yet. Let them think I was still gone. Let them believe they'd won. Because the more they looked the other way, the more I grew undetected. And with every contract we signed, I watched the numbers. Not just ours and theirs. Logan Freight, the company that used to be my father's, now run by Keith and propped up by my stepmother's arrogance. Their revenue was down. Client satisfaction was down. Turnover was climbing. And I knew exactly why. Because the clients we were taking weren't just new. They were theirs. I didn't have to attack them. I just had to be better. And let the silence do the rest. By the end of the first year, I had something more powerful than a comeback. I had leverage, but I wasn't ready to use it. Not yet. Revenge isn't served cold. It's served precise, and mine was just beginning to simmer. I didn't chase revenge. With fists or fire, I wore a suit, signed contracts, and smiled while I dismantled them. It was a Thursday morning when I walked into the same conference hall where they had erased me. Different year, different title, same eyes watching. The Logistics Summit was a meaningless industry event to most, but to me, it was the first time. I would breathe the same air as my stepmother and Keith since the day they threw me out. I wasn't there as a guest. I was one of the panelists. ArcCorp had just secured a joint contract with two of the city's largest freight distributors, both former clients of Logan Freight. The industry had started whispering, and whispers travel fast. I took the stage last, wore a charcoal suit, not flashy, not loud, just sharp enough to cut, spoke clearly, held the mic steady, and when the lights hit the crowd, I saw her. She was seated 2 rows from the front, pearls, red lipstick. The same look she wore the day she handed my future to a stranger. Her expression didn't crack, but her fingers twitched in her lap, and that was enough. Revenge isn't when they scream, it's when they sit in silence, realizing you've become the storm they thought they'd never have to face. After the panel, she approached me. Logan, just my name, not how are you, not you look well, just Logan, a name she tried so hard to erase. Didn't expect to see you here, she said carefully. I smiled, not out of politeness, out of power. I know, I replied. Most people don't expect ghosts to show up in daylight. She chuckled, a forced sound. So this is what you've been doing? I held her gaze. Building something honest. That's new for you, isn't it? Her eyes narrowed. You still blame me? No, I said quietly. I thank you. That stopped her. If you hadn't pushed me out, I never would have learned what I was really capable of. You didn't take everything from me. You gave me motive. There's no clearer path than the one paved by betrayal. Behind her, Keith hovered nervously. He looked thinner, grayer. Success hadn't aged him well. I hear your numbers are down, I said casually, turning slightly toward him. Losing contracts, key staff. Shame. He cleared his throat. Temporary. Setbacks, of course, I said, nodding. Temporary, like your position. And then I handed her an envelope. Inside's an offer. Not public, not personal, just business. She didn't open it there. She didn't need to. She knew they always know when the tables have turned. They just hope you're too kind to flip them. But I wasn't there for drama. I wasn't there for closure. I was there to let them know, and I hadn't just returned. I had arrived, and I wasn't done. Revenge isn't about shouting in courtrooms or slamming doors. It's about paperwork and patience. The envelope I handed her wasn't just an offer. It was the first nail in the coffin. Inside was a buyout proposal for 27% of Logan Freight's outstanding shares, scattered across quiet, frustrated minority investors I had been speaking with for months, all legally clean. All market rate, but the power it represented was anything but ordinary. They weren't just numbers, they were leverage, and leverage doesn't ask permission. It tilts the table. I didn't hear from her for 3 days. On the 4th, a lawyer called, polite voice. My client would like to negotiate the terms. I declined. There's no negotiation, I said. It's not an offer. It's a warning. If you want them to feel it, don't break the wall. Show them it's already crumbling. Behind the scenes, I had been buying up silence. Former executives, old clients, legal advisors, people they'd burned when they thought no one was watching. One by one, I turned their ghosts into witnesses, not for court, for strategy. We built a timeline, mapped their contracts, analyzed vendor conflicts, breach clauses, late penalties, the kind of things you overlook when you think you're untouchable. Then I called in favors from people they didn't even remember crossing. A distributor. They delayed on a shipment in 2020. I owned 40% of his current venture, a supplier they underpaid in 2021. I was now his logistics partner, the intern they once fired for attitude. She runs regional compliance for a freight auditing firm, and she remembered everything. Revenge isn't loud. It walks in dressed like accounting and walks out with your foundation. One by one, the cracks widened. Vendors pulled contracts. Partners dropped out of renewals. Auditors flagged discrepancies in quarterly reporting. And Keith, poor Keith, started sweating through his interviews. My stepmother tried to hold the fire. Line held emergency meetings, tried to rally shareholders, but she couldn't rally ghosts, because I had already bought their silence and their signatures. By the end of Q2, Logan Freight's value had dropped 43%. By Q3, the board demanded restructuring, and guess whose name came up as preferred external consultant? Not revenge, redemption, dressed in black and white, and signed in ink. I didn't say yes, not yet. I wanted one more piece. One more move. Not out of ego, but out of principle. Because it wasn't just about taking back the company. It was about making sure they knew exactly who took it from them. This time, I didn't walk into the boardroom to plead. I walked in to end it. The boardroom hadn't changed much. Same mahogany table, same pretentious chairs, same fake plants in the corner. But everything else was different, because this time, I didn't walk in as someone hoping to be heard. I walked in as someone they couldn't ignore. They were all there. The same faces who'd watched me be erased years ago. Some of them shifted in their seats. Some avoided eye contact, but a few offered tight nods. Respect, maybe. Or fear. Sometimes they're the same thing. My stepmother sat at the head, of course. Dressed sharp, eyes calm. But her knuckles were white where she clutched the armrest. Keith wasn't there. Rumor had it he was on sabbatical. Translation. They threw him out before he could ruin anything else. I didn't sit right away. I let the silence stretch, let them feel it. Then I placed the papers on the table, slowly, carefully, and slid them across. Full acquisition, I said. Legal, clean, irrevocable. One of the board members flipped through them. Another coughed. This gives him full control, someone whispered. My stepmother finally spoke. Her voice was steady but brittle underneath. You already have your company. Why take this one too? I looked at her, not with anger, with clarity. Because it was never yours to give away. The problem with stealing power is you forget how easily it can be taken back by someone who knows where you hid the keys. She tried to argue, said she built it, managed it, saved it. I didn't interrupt, I let her speak. I wanted her to hear how hollow it all sounded when said out loud. Then I said the only thing that mattered. This board has lost faith in you. And by the end of this vote, you'll lose more than that. And she did. 7-1, I didn't gloat, didn't smirk, didn't celebrate. I just took the pen and signed the papers with the same hand they once tried to cut out of the legacy. She stole a company with a signature. I reclaimed it with the same weapon. When it was done, I stood, looked at the room one last time. Then I turned to her. You taught me something, I said. That legacy isn't about blood or memory, it's about control. You tried to own it through betrayal. I reclaimed it through patience. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. The silence was her answer. You don't always destroy your enemies. Sometimes you offer them a mirror. The vote was final. The signatures were dry. The company, my father's company, was back in my hands. But revenge isn't victory. Not the way people imagine. There's no music, no slow-motion applause, just a long hallway, a quiet office, and a pile of broken history that's suddenly yours to fix. I sat alone in the executive chair she used to sit in, the same one I was once forced to vacate. Years ago I ran my fingers along the armrest. Still scratched, still real. It felt colder than I remembered. I could have fired her immediately, publicly, brutally, but I didn't. Instead, I invited her to my office. One last time. She walked in guarded but proud, always proud, even when sinking. Handed her an envelope. Inside, not a lawsuit, not a pink slip, a retirement offer, generous, quiet, dignified. She looked confused. You're letting me walk away? No, I said. I'm giving you a choice. You can walk out quietly, or stay and watch what the company becomes without you. Some endings aren't delivered by force, they're handed over and made unbearable by grace. She didn't answer. She just left, and that was louder than anything she could have. Said Keith. He never returned. Rumors say he tried to launch his own firm. It failed in 6 months. As for the board, They adjusted quickly. Money speaks, and mine now spoke loudest. But here's the thing, no one prepares you for. When you get back everything they took from you, you realize it doesn't feel like it used. So the rooms felt bigger but emptier. The people were respectful but distant. The company was alive, but the part of me that used to live for it wasn't. I won. But the version of me that lost everything, he never came back. One night I stayed late, just me, the city lights, and my father's old mug sitting on the desk. I found it in the back of a storage cabinet. Still had the chip on the rim, it made me think. He built this to provide, I rebuilt it to prove. But what now? I had spent years chasing the justice I thought I deserved, and now that it was mine, I wasn't sure I even wanted it anymore. Because revenge is a blade, sharp on both ends, and while one side cuts them, the other quietly slices at you. I took everything back. And then I let it go. I didn't announce it. No press release, no speech, no champagne farewell. Just a simple transfer, a final meeting, and one quiet signature. 2 years after I reclaimed the company, I stepped away. Not because I was tired, not because I lost, but because I no longer needed it to prove anything. I left it in the hands of someone who once started as a warehouse assistant, a woman who reminded me of myself before everything was taken, smart, relentless, honest. She didn't know the full story behind what she was inheriting, only that I believed in her, and that was enough. I walked out of the building for the last time on a Tuesday afternoon. Sun was setting. No applause. No goodbyes. Just the soft sound of my shoes on the marble floor and the distant hum of a city moving on. Sometimes the loudest victory is the one no one sees, when you leave without bitterness, without fear, without needing to be remembered. I moved to a small town 2 hours away, rented a modest home with a quiet porch and a coffee shop down the road that never asked who I used to be. No one there cared about corporate takeovers or hostile boardroom battles. They just knew me as the guy who always tipped well and liked his coffee black. I started writing again, journals at first, then outlines, then stories, not about revenge, but about rebuilding, about silence, about survival. You spend so long trying to reclaim what was stolen, you forget the best thing you can build is something that no one else can take. One morning, I got a letter in the mail, handwritten from one of the old board members. It said, "You were right, we all knew it. We were just too cowardly to stand beside you. I hope you found peace. You earned it." I didn't reply, didn't need to. The past had already faded, not because I forgot, but because it no longer defined me. Revenge gave me back my name. Letting go gave me back my life. Now, when people ask what I do, I say I'm retired, and when they ask what I used to do, I smile and say, something that taught me what not to chase again. Thank you for staying. You didn't just watch a story about revenge. You stayed through every quiet crack, every silence, every choice that hurt more than it healed. And for that, I'm grateful. Not every ending needs noise. Sometimes just knowing someone was there, listening, and is enough. We've told my story. Now I wonder, what's yours? If this reminded you of anything you've lived through, or almost did, or still carry quietly in your chest, tell me, if you had the chance to take something back, would you? Or would you walk away stronger? Simply because you didn't. Let me know. Only if you want to. I'm still listening.